Hello, I'm Neil Quigley and welcome to the latest episode of my Blogcast. Hope you're well and good. I have had another decent couple of weeks, I'm pleased to say. A couple of weekends ago, Linda and I went to meet up with some friends of ours in London. Predictably, we got there a bit early. I went for a quick bite to eat because the bar that we'd booked to go to, which was a rooftop bar, even though I put on my booking when I made it about 2 weeks prior that I was a celiac and gluten-free, when they wanted me to confirm the booking the day before was the time they decided to tell me that it wasn't safe for me to eat at their bar. That's perfectly fine. If it's not safe for me to eat there, I'd rather be told and I'll make alternate arrangements. However, I made the booking at least 10 to 12 days before they decided to tell me that I couldn't eat there, which I thought was a bit out of order. A bit more advance notice would have been better. Anyway, Linda and I went into London a bit earlier so I could grab myself an honest burger and have that while she just had some fries. She was going to get her food later because she could eat at the bar we were going to with our friends. After I'd fed myself for the evening, we still had a bit of time before our friends arrived, so we were heading towards the St Paul's area of London where the bar was. We decided to walk down the Strand to get there. Last year there was a bar we wanted to go to called the Old Bank, and when we tried to go there for a drink it was packed, so we couldn't get in. So we thought we'd give that another go as we were walking right past it. It is, as the name would suggest, in one of the buildings along the Strand that used to be a bank, so it has many of the original features, and they also make a big thing of the fact that it was a bank and make things within it bank related. As it turns out, they have a nice outside courtyard. We managed to get ourselves a table for two there. Pleased to report also for any gluten-free people or celiacs like me, they do have gluten-free San Miguel there, so I did have a bottle of that. They also have a old Routemaster London bus in the courtyard, which you can go onto, and you can actually sit on that and have some drinks if you wish. Linda and I had been on that type of bus many a time as children, so we decided to sit outside in the sunshine at the table we already had. It was really nice in there. Good atmosphere. The place has a great decor and ambience to it, so we decided to stay for a second drink. I then fancied mixing it up a little bit, so had my very first limoncello spritz, which I actually really enjoyed. Linda drinks Aperol spritz. Now, I've tried them before, but they are just too bitter for me. Obviously, the limoncello isn't particularly sweet, but it's less bitter than the Aperol, which kind of works for me, and I really enjoyed that. That was a nice drink in the sunshine. It was then time to continue our walk and meet up with our friends. We all arrived about half an hour before our booking at the bar we were going to, so we snuck in to another pub and had a drink in there. Once again, we found accidentally that it had a downstairs courtyard, so you could have a drink outside, and you wouldn't have thought that from looking at this pub as you walked in from the road. So we had a quick drink in there. The place we were going was only 5 minutes up the road, so when it was time we walked to there. It was a bar called Sabine, which is in one of the hotels around that area. It is, as I said earlier, a rooftop bar. We'd booked ourselves a table there, has great views over the city, over the Shard, and also St Paul's Cathedral can be seen in the opposite direction as well. Really nice venue. Staff were great in there. Unfortunately, I couldn't have the cocktails because once again there was a chance of cross-contamination, but they made me aware of that, so that was perfectly fine. So I stuck to the wine. Happily, they did have a nice Malbec in there, which was very enjoyable. The rest of them had the food, which did look, I must say, very nice. They had a DJ in there on the terrace with us playing some great music throughout the night. You booked the tables in 2-hour blocks. The time flew by so quickly. That is the beauty of going out to a really nice place with some really good friends. We just spent the entire night chatting and laughing. Once it was time to leave Sabine, we did go back to the pub we started in and had another drink in there before closing time. Then we headed off in different directions to catch our trains home. A fantastic evening. The venue we went to was very nice, but that really is insignificant. The reason the night was such a success was we were spending it with two really good friends and we just had a fantastic laugh. The other weekend, Linda and I went to something we have been to quite a lot over the last 5 years. There's a comedy event called the St Albans Comedy Garden, which, funnily enough, takes place in a park in St Albans. We, as I said, have gone several times. We were umming and ahhing about whether to go this year or not. We were not really sure if we could fit it into our busy schedule, but then Linda got an email through offering some discounts off the tickets for the Sunday evening show, so we decided to extend the weekend by a day and go along and enjoy that. The lineup there is always very good and it's really well set up. They mark off a section of the huge park they have there. They allow you in, I think it's about an hour and a quarter before the comedy starts. There is obviously a couple of bars there and lots of different independent food stalls. There was a steak and chips place there, so I managed to, after a conversation with the people on that stand, get myself some gluten-free steak and chips, which was very nice. I was driving and only on the water, as was Linda, to be fair. So it was a teetotal comedy night for us. Very sensible, I'm sure you'd agree, for a Sunday. It is very popular and there were loads of people there. The lineup for the Sunday evening show that we were going to see was very good, and there was certainly one comedian on the bill in particular that I really wanted to see because I'd not managed to see him live previously. Ian Smith was the compere, who happened to be the compere last time we went to the St Albans Comedy a couple of years ago. He is really good. I like him a lot. He's in the last 2 or 3 years or so been appearing on more and more Radio 4 panel shows, and also he's got his own series on the station as well, which is really good. He was fantastic. It is a bit of an odd, difficult venue for the compere because it is quite a big tent, so you're quite away from the audience, which is not ideal if you're trying to chat and do a bit of crowd work. Also, it's generally quite hot in there, and obviously Sunday evening, it's the end of the weekend. People are a little bit jaded, but he did a great job and was very funny and was fantastic at knitting it all together. The opening act was somebody we had seen before actually at this event a few years ago, Tom Rosenthal, who is funny. I like his stuff. He doesn't shy away from talking about the fact he was in Friday Night Dinner and a couple of other big comedy programs. He is the son of the sports presenter Jim Rosenthal, and Jim does get a mention, so he opened things up. Then we have the first of a few intervals, so it's good that they do that. They do give you a chance to get some fresh air and get out of the tent, and also they want you to spend a bit of money at the bars and the food places, which makes sense. that's all part of the deal. Everybody needs to earn a bit from the event. The next act on was someone who I'd not seen before, called Jen Nolan, who's from the East End of London. She was really good, really enjoyed her set, different and funny. Then we actually got another comedian before our next interval, someone I was aware of who I hadn't actually seen live before, and that was Laura Smith. She was brilliant. She has also, over the last few years, started appearing more regularly on Radio 4, and she has her own show as well called Your Mum, which is good fun. There happens to be a new series of that coming out next month. As with most comedy nights, the time was flying by very quickly. We had one more interval to go and stretch our legs, get some drinks, and possibly take a comfort break before our headline act, who Linda and I actually happened to see arrive inadvertently before the gates opened. We got there a bit early, so we were just having a bit of a walk round, and we noticed this Audi drive past us, thinking not much of it. A bit later, we just happened to be walking around the backstage area of the event and saw Ross Noble getting out of his car and grabbing all his stuff. Fair play to Ross. He was there particularly early, so he would have been there to see all of the acts. In fact, he would have caught the headline act of the show before, which was Tom Allen, who we could almost hear from outside the event, but not quite. One thing I could hear, though, is that he was getting plenty of laughs, which is good. So after the interval, it was time for Ross. Not seen him live before, have seen him on lots of panel shows and seen his stand-up on YouTube and on various TV shows. He is very unusual for a stand-up. Most comedians write and hone their material. They'll have a particular piece or even entire routines which will probably serve them well for a year to 18 months, obviously on tour and in the clubs. Not so much if they go on TV regularly. That is a very good way for a comedian to burn through material and have to write some new stuff pretty quickly. Where Ross Noble is different is, now I'm sure Ross has some ideas before he goes on stage and has a rough idea of where he wants to go or some subjects he wants to talk about. But after that, when he gets on stage, it is just sensational to watch. He has got one of these amazing brains which will just take him off in all sorts of directions at various points and very different angles as well. It's a roller coaster ride. You are never sure exactly what he is going to say next or where he is going, but it is very funny, and he always, like every good comic does, weaves it all back together and brings it back around to itself. I really enjoyed seeing him, and the great thing about seeing Ross is because of the way he does his comedy, every show is very unique, and there'll be lots of stuff that he probably only would have said at that St Albans gig that he will, I would suspect, not say again. It was another great evening there. It's always very well organised. They get you out of the venue quite quickly, and even the car park, which is next door, does empty out relatively quickly. If we can make it next year, I'm sure we'll go back again. I was diagnosed with celiac disease in 2021, not long after we came out of the first lockdown, as it happened. That means ever since that point, I've been on a fully gluten-free diet, a very strict gluten-free diet, which has meant generally eating out at a Chinese restaurant or even having Chinese takeaway food was a complete no-go. There is generally lots of gluten in their dishes. Soy sauce, unless you're using special gluten-free soy sauce, has gluten in it, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, rules out quite a lot of Chinese dishes. However, Linda discovered a month or so ago that one of the Chinese restaurants in Chinatown in London had started doing some gluten-free Chinese food on their menu. The reason behind their plan to do that was quite simply one of the owner's children, who was just 4 years old, got diagnosed as a celiac, which meant obviously they were on a very strict gluten-free diet. And the parents didn't want the child to miss out on Chinese food, so they had a good look at their menu and tried to work out what dishes they could still make very well but make them gluten-free. After using them to feed their son for a bit, they then decided to bring them into the restaurant itself. So Linda took me there last Friday. I was very excited about going because other than when she has cooked Chinese food for me at home, I had not had any Chinese food from a takeaway or a restaurant since before I was diagnosed. We had booked a table, but they do hold quite a lot of walk-in spaces. We were on the third floor. Yeah, the third floor. It's a huge restaurant. They took us to our seat. There was a special gluten-free menu which I had to ask for. They do have gluten-free Estrella, which is a Spanish beer, gluten-free on the menu. So I had a bottle of that. Seemed a fitting drink, I thought, to go with the Chinese meal. There was quite a lot to choose from. And bearing in mind, I had not been to a Chinese restaurant for quite some time, Linda very kindly offered to also order off the gluten-free menu, which meant we could order more dishes that I could try because we could each try each other's dishes. This was both of our first visits there, so we weren't sure what their portion sizes were like at this point. We did get a little bit carried away. I wanted to have some of the dim sum because obviously not something I get very often, so I went for the prawn dim sum. It made sense to get a rice dish, so we got the mixed rice. Linda liked the look of the beef noodles, so we got that. Also, there was a lamb and cumin dish, which Linda seemed quite interested in. And I do like salt and pepper squid, but I don't get that very often. They had that on the gluten-free menu. So we ordered all of that. I also fancied the sweet and sour chicken. I know, quite an obvious dish, but as I said, I'd not had Chinese for quite a while, and that kind of reminded me of Chinese takeaways when I was a kid. I thought I had ordered that dish. All the food started coming out. Their portions were huge, so there was lots of it. All of the gluten-free food comes with a flagging, and the dim sum come in different shaped containers. They come in square containers instead of the round containers, so you can see visually that you've got the right gluten-free food, which is always a big relief for me. All this food is on the table. We're starting to make our way through it, and it becomes apparent that we are both becoming very full. At this point, I still think I might have a sweet and sour chicken coming, which is now starting to worry me because I know there's no way I'm going to be able to eat that if it turns up, and I would be very disappointed. I would have had to have asked for a box to take it away in and probably eaten it the next day. However, somehow, thankfully, the waiter managed to miss that off the order, so the sweet and sour chicken never arrived. I was very relieved, but I will definitely be ordering that the next time we go back. It was a really nice experience, thoroughly enjoyed it. The pricing I thought was very reasonable. It's called the Golden Phoenix. That is the restaurant that do the gluten-free food. Well worth checking out if you're celiac or just eat gluten-free. I had absolutely no problems eating there. Once we'd finished there, we worked out we were very close to a wine bar we really like in Leicester Square called the Cork and Bottle. So we thought it would be rude not to pop in there for a couple of glasses of red wine. They do several nice Riocas in there, which is my red wine of choice. So I had a couple of glasses of one of them, and Linda had a couple of wines as well. We then headed off at a reasonable time to get a train out of London before it got too busy. It was a very successful Friday night. Last Saturday, we had booked a local restaurant near to Linda's house that we go to quite often. It was another bright, sunny, gorgeous day. About 18 months ago, we went to a wine cottage wine tasting led by the fantastic Cam. We bought lots of wine that we tasted on that day, and we still had a bottle of the white left. Now, I don't really drink white wine. I prefer red, but I did the tasting, and I remember enjoying this white wine on the day. It was really nice. So as it was a nice day, Linda and I decided to open that before we went out to dinner and share that in the sunshine in her back garden, which was fantastic. Then we left for the restaurant a little bit early because we'd heard there was a market on the canal, and the market was from canal barges. So basically the barges were there selling different items and different foodstuffs. We found one called Baldrick, which was basically a floating barge bar. So you could order drinks from it, and there were seats alongside of the barge on the canal where you could sit and have your drinks. So we thought it would be rude not to. So we stopped off at the Baldrick bar, the barge, to have a drink prior to dinner. Then it was off to dinner, had a fantastic meal in Ronav's as usual, and I finished it with the gluten-free San Sebastian cheesecake covered in melted chocolate with ice cream. It's great. It does mean I have to work out like an absolute demon for the next 7 days after eating it, but I thoroughly enjoy it. And then on the way back, we stopped off at our new favourite barge bar because it was still open and he was doing cocktails. So he made us two really nice espresso martinis to end our evening. Had a fantastic time, and it topped off the weekend very nicely. Have some busy weekends coming up. I'll tell you about them next time we speak, but that is it for now. Take care of yourselves and each other, please, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye bye.